We live in a fast-paced and hectic world where it's easy to feel overwhelmed, stressed, and out of control. How do you manage all the competing pressures without losing sense of yourself? How do you stay focused enough to not only plot a path, but follow it? Welcome to Master Your Life, a show that offers inspiration, insight, and intelligence, as well as success stories from many walks of life that can show you how you can control your own destiny. Our knowledgeable and entertaining host and her guests give practical advice that you can use every day in the quest to master your life. Now, here's your host, Leaha Mattinson.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode. We're having some laughs right at the beginning of this big shenanigan fest we call Master Your Life. So for those of you who have joined in today from wherever it is that you are on this beautiful planet, thank you so much for tuning in once again. I'm host Leaha Mattinson, and this week I'm joined by Dr. David Hardy. Dr. Dave, how are you today?
Oh, I'm fantastic. Yes, thanks.
And we're laughing because we've had like a few little glitches already this morning. The mics didn't work. We've got, the computer fell over. We were talking about Rogers Wireless going down last week, and just kind of there's all of these wild things sort of going on, and that really it is about our ability to adapt to the situation, whatever it is. That often is the reason why we have success or failure in life. So we're going to dedicate this episode to managing transitions. For sure. So Dr. Dave is a functional neurologist, and he's actually a teacher as well. So he's trained in many modalities, and he is out of the Collegiate Sports Center in Red Deer, Alberta, Canada. So for those of you who are looking for information on functional neurology, please check out Dr. David Hardy. Again, he's in Red Deer. You can find more about him in our show notes, or if you come to masteryourlife.ca, you can read his CV and find out all about him and how to connect with him. So, Dr. Dave, talk to us about what happens in the brain, or what is happening with us when we're going through transitions. What are some of the ones that are really common you think that people have to manage besides these little technical glitches?
Right. Well, yeah, you've got to manage basically any political or economic change that constantly fluctuates. And of course, we're going through absolute crap storm on all of that. Right. Relationships, job, careers, family situations, friends, relocating locations. There's just so much that's going to kind of change and bump our brains out of them wanting to be in the regular patterns that they develop and latch onto. So it can be kind of stressful for anybody.
Yeah. And let's talk about what stress is, because I think that it's like this whole thing of stress that people go, oh, I'm stressed out, or I stressed out for the entire day. So I didn't do anything all day because I was completely stressed out. And that's often how people feel in the changing times. But what's going on in the brain, and why does it freeze? And is there ways to get it unstuck, I guess? But let's just talk about the big freeze first. What's right. Causing that? Whoa, I can't do anything.
Yeah. So basically, since we've been born, we develop these patterns, and these patterns become more and more efficient. And the brain wants to use these efficient pathways. And of course, the more efficient something becomes, the more rigid it's going to become. And those are our regular habits, routines, and unconscious areas of the brain that influence us. And all of that's basically for us to react to everything going on around us. And then, of course, things change and we get thrown out of this. So stress really is kind of that new pattern that we've got to develop in our brain. And if we hold on to these old ones, of course, then it's more difficult to move into new patterns. And the more flexible we are, basically cognitively, mentally, means that we're able to form new patterns quicker. And then it's less stressful for us. So basically, those are people that are constantly in a routine of switching patterns and need that novelty. So there is kind of this balance or spectrum between too much, too little, and just the right amount. So when stress turns into trauma is basically when that system is can't keep up with the rate of change that it needs to do, and gets overwhelmed. And then,
what
of
would be an
course,
example of that? What would be an example of where stress turns into trauma?
right. Basically, any situation where we're just kind of thrown for a loop. So it can be in a relationship where all of a sudden things just go bizarre, crazy, and it may be abusive, it may not be, but the intensity of that stimulation now is just something that overwhelms our system and we can't deal with it. And then it becomes a traumatic event. And so then the key is to have a system that is the most adaptable. And I use the muscle analogy is you want to develop that big, large muscle, basically with your brain being able to handle outside stimulation and control your own body and emotions and all those functions within us. And it really is that battle between the outside world and our inside world, and how they react and interact with each other. And then, of course, a lot of it's going to be that mental aspect to it, but also it's a lot of physical things. You think about any habit or anything that we respond to, it is that ability to handle stimulation. And we can train that, which is exciting.
The ability to handle stimulation, I'm thinking automatically I go to the amount of technology that people are surrounded with. So there's lots of stimulation around. There's different kinds of stimulation.
Big time, absolutely.
Too. So
yes.
that kind of the understanding even what those are can be really helpful to going, oh, I didn't even realize that was a stimulus. I didn't realize that was triggering me. That,
Right.
Whatever kind of music playing in the background, for example, is, can be very influencing.
Big time. And yeah, music's a great example. And sound, basically, there's sounds that calm us and then there's sounds that alert us. And yeah, we've all got those playlists of things that we like to listen to get us into that ideal state. But that ideal state could be a relaxed state, kind of that meditative music, or it could be that like loud banging music to get you up and going and doing something. But also with sound and music, well, let's think about when the system can get overwhelmed again. So let's look at concussions and brain injuries. People who have sound sensitivities, they can't handle that stimulation. And then also, well, the classic example as we age is, okay, well, in order to drive, I'm going to turn down the music so I can concentrate on the road type thing and get through that rainstorm. And basically it's all this sensory information coming together that really is what our system can take in. And once again, what it can handle and what it can't handle. And aging and trauma, whether it's emotional or whether it's physical, like a concussion, really does give us that example of what happens when our systems can't handle things. And it's once again something that we can train and make more efficient. And that's going to tell us how we perform, and then also how we decline as we age, or what happens when we get injured. So.
Right. And so what's the difference between somebody's brain who has had a concussion and somebody's brain who has just listened to, let's say, hard rock booty music for 30 years, or has, lived under a tremendous amount of stress in just a stressful relationship, or been inundated with, disturbing news over a span of time? Is there very much difference actually in the brain when you look at it?
No, not really. Basically, you're just describing the mechanism of injury. And that mechanism can be a combination of things quite commonly, but also it's going to be toxins, trauma, and injuries. And that can be emotional, that can be physical, that can be a virus or a pathogen, that could be our diet. All of these are going to really hammer and take away from how that brain actually functions and works. And the key here is too, like there's good plasticity, meaning the brain changes and makes better connections, or there can be negative plasticity. And all of that's determined by the frequency, how often something happens, the intensity and duration. And it's either for the better or for the worse. And if we know that, we can start to manage these stressful situations. It's like, okay, well, yeah, some good stress is going to make my system better. Okay. But I need to do it at the right frequency. So spaced out throughout the day. The intensity can't exceed what I can handle. And we definitely know that if it happens for too long, it's very toxic for the brain. Mm-hmm. And even if it's something good, like reading a book or studying, if you do that for too long, you're going to actually do worse. And then if you frequently just did a little chunk of it here and there, and that's the same for any arguments. Healthy marriages and relationships have arguments. And there's really the difference is, once again, how the systems can handle it, and also how those individuals kind of space things out and recover from these as well. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there's always going to be that tension. And if there isn't tension, then it's boring as well.
Right. Exactly. Yes. You just die from boredom. So yes, I think that's great. The argument / debate skill is a skill, right? So it's going, Absolutely. Are you a good debater? Are you articulate? Do you know what you want? Do you respect the other person? Those, fundamental things. And relationships are key to everything in life.
Oh, yeah. We're social creatures. We just can't go without them. And there's no way we'd want to.
Yeah. Yes. Because doing that, just kills us faster, actually. And longevity studies, it shows that, yes, the people who live the longest are not necessarily the people who are following the strictest regimen of diet, but those who actually are surrounded by people who love and care for them.
Exactly. Yes.
Yes. So think about that a little bit. What might be going on that people want to keep you from your loved ones, or that there's just been such a decimation in families and marriages, and the skills required to be able to navigate adult relationships and kid relationships really have not been taught all that well. So social skills, social niceties, but also the boundaries, like having good boundaries can help you to have better relationships, which again gets completely missed in this all-inclusive, everything goes mentality. Oh, that's okay. Right. It's like, no, you actually need to think about what your boundaries are, because having boundaries matters too, to the protection of your brain, right?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It gives us a sense of control over things. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so the mechanism of injury, this is a good time for people just to take a moment and jot down for yourself, what are some of the mechanisms of injury that maybe have happened to you, or that you're allowing, more importantly, in your own life, and to go, what are those things? And kind of having that candid conversation with yourself first about what are the things that I'm doing. It could be simple things, right? Dr. Dave, like, listening to the morning news and knowing that it sets your hackles off every single morning. And then maybe you don't have the physical, mental, and spiritual capacity to hold that every single day, but yet you still torment yourself with it. And that's, I think, the kind of learning where your limits are, why it's important to learn where your limits are. Like, is it good to sit there for a half an hour with the cortisol dumping through your body as you listen to whatever the latest thing is, and not to say that one shouldn't watch anything and be completely uneducated about what's going on in the world, because that's irresponsible, so it's that learning, right? So the soft sort of learning about your own boundaries. So
big time. Yeah. And the reason we're always constantly drawn to this is, of course, it gets us into a heightened state. So it makes us feel more alive and energized. And the thing is, well, is there another way we can do that? And also realize that being in that state constantly all the time is actually very detrimental to us. We need to change our state. So once again, we're in that rigid, always go fight mode. And yeah, that feels good for a while. And yeah, you watch any action movie, and of course you get into that zone, and yeah, you feel alive. But at the same time, that should be followed by a recovery period where once again, it's that rest and take care of your own body and recover from that situation. And that goes for arguments as well in relationships. I think one of the reasons why things really fall apart for a lot of people is that they get used to and subconsciously really enjoy or become addicted to that feeling of being alert and in that moment and confrontational. And then they don't work on that recovery period and that bonding time as well. And that's just going to cause the whole system to fall apart. And then of course, if the system falls apart and physically you become more sluggish, then everything's going to require an extra hit to bring you back up into that state that you've been really reliant on. And things get worse and worse as the years pile up. And then of course you'll look at yourself and realize, wow, I've had it and it's done.
Which is not the great state to get into. So again, for those who are listening to the show, I know that you're all trying to master your life. We're trying to recover from something because that's the title of the shows, right? So that's why you're tuned in and you go, okay, well, what am I going to master my life about? And part of that really is the self-awareness of where you are physically, mentally, emotionally, so that spiritually, so that you can actually change something about it. But one of the practices that I use is I write things down. And I talk about it often because it's, I think, something that people do less and less and less. We've got a lot of people who are illiterate, a lot of people who are, learning all these other different modalities of staying on like whiteboards and things that are electronic versus just the good old pen and paper. And there is a difference between those two tools, and they're tools in your toolbox. So just writing down with your right hand and then with your left hand, whichever one's dominant and whichever one's non-dominant for fun.
I think it's important that we find outlets to get rid of this tension that builds up. And journaling can be part of it. Like if it's more negative to begin with, that's okay. If you're venting and letting it out in an appropriate situation, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But we should always follow it up with, once again, something that's going to take us into this recovery mode and into a different state and re-energize. And it can be a combination of that. And sometimes it's good just to write it on a piece of paper and then cross it out and then go into that positive, more flow and recovery, re-energize yourself. And it's experimenting and finding these things that, once again, will soothe the system after you've brought it into this huge stressful mess.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. One of the things that I've found over the years, because I was a personal trainer, like you're athletic and do training around in rugby, and you played rugby yourself. And, so the athleticism helped. But it was often that tapping into that, again, like amping oneself up. And with the Qigong practice, it's kind of, you can do both sides of that. So it's a little bit more than just the 5-minute cool down walk that a lot of people who do the Western sort of style of training, that's their cool down. If they do it right, at all. Right, it's like, I'm going to go for a 5-minute walk after I just kicked my own butt doing whatever sport, or I'm going to go drink beers with my friends because we just played a game of whatever it is, and celebrate the win or the loss, whatever it is. And so those are very Western ways of actually what's, kind of cooling down or coming down from stuff, which is it's interesting, right? But in Qigong, there is actually that you encourage the flow of energy in a flowing way, like flowing and powerless. So it feels completely different. It's completely different movements. But then you become very body present also. So you're not sort of out externally thinking about other things as you're running and getting to the next goal and getting to the next mile, or hitting the next person on the field, whatever it is, or avoiding the hit in life,
in life,
in life and in wherever else. But you're more in the state of flow, and you're able to actually be like a bamboo in the wind, is what sort of that strong and flexible, the ability to go and sway with the big storms. Because the thing about bamboo is it's very, very strong. It's very hard to break, but it can actually withstand huge winds. And so your ability as a human being to be able to do that, because that's real life. And there's lots of stuff that goes on that is not just a gentle breeze, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And
Where'd
kind of
that
on
come
that
from?
point too, I use the example that, if I've got this tension that's built up inside of me, the hard exercise and sports really release that energy and tension.
Yes.
And in a way that meditation doesn't for myself. And some people are going to be different, that the meditation will relieve that tension. But what the meditation does for me after I've released all this tension is it helps me recover and re-energize. So I think too, using the tools that's out there, but adapting them for what actual results you get from it, and at different periods of time is kind of the approach people should be using. That the Tai Chi is amazing exercise, and you can take it to that release tension state, and then also to that recovery and flow state. And then there's also the music. You can get that tension out with a big thumping headbanging music, and then there's nothing wrong with going into classical right after or something else. It's once again using and adapting all these things and methods out there that's going to work best for you.
So let's talk about the power of nature in healing and in bringing down that autonomic response. Sometimes nature can be scary. It's like, run from the bear, run. But a lot of it is much nicer, like birds chirping, bunnies hopping around. We just have a set of beautiful new little twin fawns that have just been born outside. Oh, they're so cute. Just got their little spots still on them, and baby bunnies kind of hopping around right now as well. So there's all this really cool things in nature. But what is it that nature does that harmonizes us?
Yeah, once again, it's these natural rhythms and frequencies and colors, which is frequency of light. And all of these are kind of things that we've evolved with, that put us into that state. So the really cool thing about how the architecture of the brain works, and you can take this to the most spiritual level possible, or to the most geeky scientific based, but basically everything starts at that receptor, once again, flows through nerves up the spinal cord in different parts of the brain. And these are different frequencies of energy that we've had stimulate us from that receptor, from the outside world. So all these sounds, colors, everything coming in from the outside world is at different frequencies. And these then set the frequencies of our brain. So basically, we're this vessel for all this energy coming in from the outside world into our own bodies. So these baseline frequencies in our brain are actually the same frequencies of these different energies from the outside world. And we kind of collect these, and then we kind of adapt and mold these into the energy or state that we want, which would actually be a reaction to the outside world. So nature is this system of these baseline brainwave frequencies, and we're more in sync with our outside world and the way our internal world is actually firing and working. So it does have that calming, relaxing, and and feel good.
Yes.
Be
Soothing.
with yourself and be with nature.
Even in a snowstorm. A little segue to frequencies. I use also terahertz frequencies for
Yes.
healing. And so that's a very powerful modality. Do you know anything at all about terahertz frequency, Dr.
All of
Dave?
these are going to be frequencies that are going to fire in through our nervous system and give us a result that the body is looking for. And we can hack these, which is really amazing. Is that, yeah, we can stimulate different nerves that are going to fire into different parts of the nervous system and brain and change how that system is actually moving. And that's either going to excite or inhibit another part of the brain. So sometimes this calming frequency is going to excite kind of that soothing body sensation we get, and then also inhibit that extreme kind of go, go, go mode we have. And the terahertz is kind of an example of that, is that it's firing into the system and resetting it to be at that firing that's going to take care of our own body. And it becomes really exciting to get people functioning and improving their lives. And the thing about these outside devices too is that we can change the intensity of that stimulation and kind of program it to work for that individual person in front of us. So somebody who's really kind of in this horrible situation, we don't want to do stimulations that are too intense, because then we set them off and do more damage. But some of these more gentle frequencies can be used longer, and we can actually dial that up a little bit more and make ourselves get out of this horrible stressed out state that the manufactured human world throws us into.
Yeah. And it's been a big gift, I would say, having this Huntington's disease, in the family and in my own view, that I've always been seeking to be well since I got the piece of paper in my hand that said I had inherited it. And that's been 14 years. So it's been a long time. Yeah, I was going, wow, that's a long time. And so I go to market and I test things out, sometimes first, far before lots of other people do, simply because I want to be as healthy as I possibly can and head off the symptoms at the pass. So I know having a healthy brain is, because that's where Huntington's starts and is in your brain and brain cell death. So I've been doing that reverse engineering. How do you actually have a really healthy brain for a very long time? But when I found this, so the terahertz frequency stuff, I went, okay, well, I'm going to try it out and just see how it works, because if it doesn't, then I'm certainly not going to say anything about it. But I've had this incredible result for people who actually watch the show. So you can go to masteryourlife.ca, and you'll notice that in my office, I always have my guitar sitting behind me in my office. And I've played guitar and sang for years and years and years. And I've been using this iTeraCare, the Pro device, the professional device. So you can find out more about that on the website. So I've been using it for now just about 2 months. And I had a really bad injury cut on my index finger of my hand. Now, I've talked about this before because I got results within about the first 3 days. I started being able to feel something. And I went, holy man, like that's different. So, but now I can actually do up my own necklaces. I can do up the diaper shirt buttons, snaps on the grandkids' little diaper shirts. And that's I can feel it is really crazy. Very this stuff. It's absolutely life-changing. And I can play guitar. I can play guitar so well. And for those of you who actually play any instruments, you know that it's heartbreaking if you can't actually play, that I thought I wasn't going to be able to play again. So it's been sitting there for a long time, and I'll pull it out to, play a couple things for the grandkids, but not actually to play. And so, I pulled it out yesterday and I was playing and went, holy man, like I can actually feel it all, which is completely different. Like it's completely different. So for people who are looking at, ways of improving the frequency of their health, and I actually feel better like I feel better. And so if you compare a video from 2 months ago to now, you can also look and go, does she look any better too? Because there's the other proof is in the pudding. And one of the things that actually got my attention about this particular device, so it's only by this manufacturer as well. So you need to know where the scientific studies are coming out of and educate yourself about the fraudulent stuff that's on the market. Because believe me, I've invested in things too along my life that I went, oh man, what did I do there? But this has actually got the science behind it. So people who want to check it out can check it out further on the website. But yeah, the amazing testimonials are really something else when people can get their life back and get back to work, get back to work in their life and feeling better. I was in a shop in town here, and this lady said to me, I was just getting some help with something. And she said, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I have a podcast and I do health stuff. And she said, oh, to ask me a couple more questions. I was talking about the podcast and about the grandchildren. And she said, you have grandchildren? I said, yeah, I have like 4 grandchildren and another 2 on the way. She goes, holy man, you must have started young. And I said, no, right. I'm 54. She's like, you're 54? Holy man, like, what do you do? So I just said, you got to come and check this stuff out because we do some really amazing things here. But it's the same with anything. You actually have to do it. So when people go, oh, is it easy? Everything is easy if you commit to it. So that's what my daughter says to me. Mom, don't tell people it's easy. Tell them you worked to be in the health that you're in. So take credit for the work that you've done. Don't just brush it off. It takes attention to actually be in good health. But part of this, what I want to get back to is what animates you, because you made the statement that stuff animates you when you're outside, and paying attention to what animates you helped me. Paying attention to that really helped me to cull the things that I didn't want to animate me. Yes. Right? Because there's lots of stuff that animates you that's simply really, really not good at all. Yeah. So it's like, no, I don't need that in my brain. And I don't need that in my, think about the song from Mario, the Mario game. It's like, I played that probably for, 3 weekends in my whole life. And that still goes, I can still, when I hear it, I go, oh, there's the Mario game. But that's how influenced we are by stuff. Yeah. Right. So
that also goes into basically just what a wonderful system we have is that if you think about nature being calming, that should be our regular mode. And then all these other kind of intense situations, that should just be a reactionary one that we have when things are, once again, frightful or are in that realm. But then we should go back to this kind of natural, just lying around, grazing the grass or whatever you want to call it. And then react to the next kind of stressful stimulation and response. And those should be far and few in between. But our natural state should be kind of more this calm, relaxed, being in nature type state. And it's all these man-made human things and then throw that system out of balance. And now we've got to fight and get back into it and to stay in that good shape. It's actually enjoyable once you start to do it, and it's enjoyable because you feel better versus getting this hit constantly that you go from sluggish to being hyper aroused and back into sluggishness. It's a more even keeled one throughout our days. And then also when we are in those hyper aroused, stressful situations, we deal with them better.
Yeah. And this is a really important point, I think, Dave, is that when and I think you're in the same boat as me, is when I was young, I was able to actually learn how to be body autonomous. So my body I was physically outside a lot. And so there was things outside that would challenge me or whatever. And then I would figure out the challenge. So our ability to figure out the challenge young also enables us to be able to continue to figure out the challenge when we're older. And some of the things I think that we've really, really done tremendously bad is to take away kids' ability to actually have real life challenges. by sticking them on their devices. Like they're not actually, that's not a real life challenge at all. There's like, it's like, can I have another $25 this month to play at the Xbox or whatever it is? Sorry, but whatever it is, because I don't play any of that stuff. But really, if you're doing that, and it's whatever, if you're doing that, but don't imagine that's a real world challenge. And so you're not learning that confidence really early on, or even later in life, because you're afraid of nature, or you're too interested in other things. But once you sort of have that confidence about your body's ability to heal itself, to feel good, like to improve your emotional state, and like just by breathing, for example, being consciously breathing, and you kind of get how much power you have, then you can feel like you have control over that, what animates you again, because breath animates.
And that body confidence comes from movement.
Yes.
And
not moving on the couch.
No, not just moving your thumbs and your ears.
I rolled over again on the couch.
In the whole body.
Sometimes that's important. I'm just teasing, but you know what we're saying here, I'm sure. But body confidence really does. And when we teach our little ones when they're little to actually like skirmish with each other or wrestle around when they're from a very little age, like they start to learn about their body and just what their body can do. And they also learn about pain too, right? They go, well, that is a little too much, but if we're just kind of cushioning people without any real experience, man, I went out to the playground. Just like the playground segue.
The helicopter parents were out.
Oh my God. It's just like, where's the fun here? There's not one bit of danger. It's like, that's why people go to the playground, is to play and to have fun, and to sense like there could be something risky that goes on here, not everything 2 inches off the ground so that nothing can happen. So it's kind of this robbing of the joy also of just that little bit of edge, the dragons that we have to fight in our life, or imaginary ones, whatever. But it's very, very, very funny.
And the imaginary ones we're going to stress out more if we haven't learned how to move and adapt our bodies to once again these dangerous situations. Like the whole reason we have a brain and nervous system is so we can move, and that's how it evolved. Basically, we went from kind of plant-like organisms into animal organisms. It was the movement that developed a nervous system. And there's a great TED talk on the sea squirt, which goes basically from this from this moving larvae with a small little nervous system, small little brain, and then it finds the perfect rock, it plants itself, and then it digests its own nervous system. So if you're sedentary, the nervous system declines.
Right.
It is meant to move and react. And that's the basic level of why we have a nervous system and a brain. And if we're not allowing kids to react and move their body to dangerous situations, then when they're in imaginary situations, the nervous system hasn't learned how to deal with a stressful event. And then you get people with anxiety disorders and who are just ramped up beyond all belief to little stressful situations that we should be able to deal with and cope with. And that's basically a brain that hasn't developed properly. And it's because of that lack of movement and lack of response to dangerous situations, such as just falling.
Yeah, just falling. Yes. There's a little something called ATP that we create that actually caught my interest, 14 years ago or so, because of this diagnosis too. And I went, because my dad's movement disorder was very significant. Like he moved all the time. And I thought, I wonder how he keeps that ATP production up. And do you know what ATP is, Dave?
Absolutely. So ATP is basically our energy. And if you've got a movement disorder, you're going to be chewing through that energy faster. And that's too why you start to get more of a quicker decline with it. The inhibitory kind of that brake system in our body isn't working. So then we're just constantly going, and you do chew through your energy supplies. And that's why there's a lot of fatigue with these disorders too, as they start to happen. And then of course all the resources from the body are going to this abnormal movement disorder versus being able to cognitively think. And we see this in other things that happen with degeneration and decline as well. And Huntington's is a real big example of what happens when things go wrong, and that we can learn from it to kind of dial it back into healthy living as well. And it is one of these things. We know the system can decline in these conditions, and it's a late onset disease, though. It happens later in life. So the question becomes well, are there things we can do to keep the system healthier so that it doesn't all of a sudden start to decline and make that shift? Is there kind of this threshold point where if we've stressed it out too much, that then this degeneration and genetic expression takes place, versus once again going from being functional and to being pathological? And I believe there is. And I think the more we can do the things that you're doing, the later this onset's going to take place. And it's just a matter of those studies to actually start to take place and happen, because, well, they're lifespan studies, which are very difficult to do and requires some forward thought from the people that fund research.
Yeah, definitely. And so just to, I guess, recap a little bit about the Huntington's disease thing, because this is important. Parkinson's is late onset. Huntington's is usually 35-ish years old, where people are starting to show the symptoms. And then it kind of goes on from there. And there's juvenile onset of Huntington's disease as well. So for children, and that's in a certain segment of the population. And the only reason I wanted to clarify that is because lots of people who have Huntington's lose their ability to work at the exact age where they are just getting into their careers. So they lose their ability to provide for their family. They lose their ability to just function normally in society. So I just wanted to clarify that. Mm-hmm. So with transitions, the transitioning of all of these things that happen day to day in our lives, what are some of the biggest hurdles, would you say, around habits that people currently have, and ways that they can actually, small steps that they can take to kind of wean themselves off? And is weaning off something that actually people can do, or do you actually have to wean on to something else?
I think that's a really good point to say, is that wean yourself onto something else, because if you concentrate on what you can't have, then eventually you're going to break down. Mm-hmm. And I use the diet example. If you concentrate on the foods you can't have, then it's going to be maddening. But if you concentrate on the foods you like, enjoy, that are going to be good for you, then it's very sustainable. And it really is finding that new focus and attention to take you to something better versus something that's detrimental to you. And that shift is so key in these transition periods, as we hold on to the kind of that past or that pattern that we want, because it's efficient, and that's where our brain goes to, and that's comfortable, versus something that's new, maybe a little scary, or is scary. We got to focus on something that's going to get us into a different state that helps us out, versus something that throws us for a loop. And it's really, do we want a cascade that's going to slowly get us better or maintain us or slow down that decline? Or do we want to be caught into that cascade where one bad thing leads to another bad thing, and things compound and get worse and worse and speed up that downward spiral? And I think we're thrown into that too much. And sometimes use the example of addictions is that it's a downward spiral till somebody basically gets to that point where they're worn out, and then they're like, okay, I'm done with this. And so hitting rock bottom is being kind of the strategy with addictions, but there's a lot of people that probably could make little shifts before it hits rock bottom. And in other conditions, we have to make those shifts before somebody hits rock bottom, because basically rock bottom would mean that things have deteriorated too much and are past that point that they can recover from.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I just am really enheartened by people who actually overcome stuff that's been difficult. And a lot of people keep their difficulties in private, held privately. And so this is important too, because there's having trusted advisors or trusted mentors, so that you actually have somewhere that you can speak about what it is that you're trying to achieve in your life. So a lifestyle, let's say that you're trying to lose weight or you're trying to figure out your nutrition, like actually going to somebody like Dr. Dave to get some help around that, or checking out what we have on the masteryourlife.ca website are important strategies, because you know that people have kind of gone down, run the gauntlet is what, like we've run the gauntlet. So it's like, yes, you can come and go. Okay, what are the things that these people have done that actually work for them to be able to consistently show up in their life and run a profession, run a business, like, manage family members? What are these people doing? And how do I actually get in alignment with people? Like, I know you're part of a group of people that is, high functioning entrepreneurs, and so you help people to get well that are, introverted managers, so that they can come to you for that advice, guidance, help, support, and to be able to say what their goals are out loud in a safe place. So this is different than saying your goals out loud to everybody and their dog, because that's one strategy that people do. It's like, oh, I'm going to tell everybody what I'm going to achieve, and and then they fail, and then they go, oh, I feel so bad about all that and ashamed of myself, and then they don't get through it. So the part of having trusted advisors or mentors really is about saying, here's what the baby steps are. And here's how I can get healthier faster, is by going with somebody who's actually already been there, done that.
It's the most efficient way to get better. And I love how you also tossed in the example of, well, what if I just talk about things? Isn't that the same thing? And it's the complete opposite. If you're just telling a friend that you're going to do something, you get that initial rush of actually completing something without the accountability behind it. Mm-hmm. So if you're actually wanting to reach something higher, basically you need to hire somebody that's going to put you through the steps and help you out and keep you on that track, or you need to shut up and not tell anybody about it and hope that you're strong enough to actually do it. Mm-hmm. And in a stressful situation, of course, that cognitive strength disappears. So you do want that outside voice with it as well. It's going to walk the path and guide you.
Yeah, fantastic. We're out of time, Dr. Dave. Can you believe it? One more episode and we're out of time once again. So for those of you who want to watch any previous episodes, please come to the masteryourlife.ca website. You can see all of our interviews, which are amazing. The amount of information that you can take to actually transform your health and your relationships, your well-being, and your satisfaction in life. So thank you, Dr. David Hardy, for being such a wonderful guest once again.
Thank you.
Everyone, love yourselves. Love yourselves. This is the most important key to getting anything in your life, is if you loved yourself, what would you really do for yourself? What would you really want in your life? So love yourselves for real. Write it down. Love each other. Mind your minds. That's all for us. Bye for now.
Thank you for being a part of our program today. Master Your Life is a presentation of Leaha Mattinson Enterprises, Inc. Join us next time on Master Your Life, helping you to discover the very best of you.